Sometime after the events of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Sam Wilson has now fully embraced his title as the new Captain America. But when Sam is summoned to the White House by the new president, trouble ensues when his friend Isaiah Bradley uncontrollably tries to assassinate the president and is jailed for the attempt. With very little time to uncover the true culprit, Sam and his partner Joaquin Torres must foil an evil plot that unwittingly involves President Thunderbolt Ross. And while that synopsis does make Brave New World sound a lot like the previous two Captain America films, I can't deny that it's actually far worse than either of those movies. Yes, while Civil War and The Winter Soldier may be considered two of the best MCU features, Brave New World will be remembered as one of the worst MCU films, if it's even remembered at all, because this movie is frustratingly forgettable. I mean, you would think that a movie that involves a new president wanting to rebuild the Avengers would give the overarching Marvel narrative some much needed structure, but the movie doesn't even feel all that necessary itself. And that may have something to do with the extensive reshoots that took place during this movie's production. Now, there's nothing wrong with reshoots in and of themselves, as they can often elevate the material that already exists. Hell, they're so common these days that Marvel reshoots are expected on damn near all of their projects. But instead of adding a few minor things that could have enhanced the narrative that existed, these reshoots that took place with Brave New World specifically seem to have retooled the entirety of the narrative. And you can tell as you watch the movie, because Brave New World feels like a weird Frankenstein's monster of sorts. So I have no idea how much of the final product actually had to do with Julius Onah's directorial vision. And without a clear vision, the whole movie lacks a particular style of its own. But okay, reshoots aside, how does the final product stand on its own? Still pretty forgettable. Sam has a side quest with a minor villain named Sidewinder, and that storyline never actually goes anywhere satisfying. Especially since, due to the nature of the reshooting, it never looks like Anthony Mackie is actually sharing the screen with Giancarlo Esposito. So every scene where these two characters were supposedly together, I was immediately pulled out of the movie, which was admittedly infuriating since Esposito's incredible acting talents were severely underutilized here. Then, Sam's main story involves uncovering a mind control conspiracy involving a good friend of his, and that definitely feels like a retread of Steve Rogers' journey with Bucky as the Winter Soldier, meaning that it's hard not to compare this movie to the other films in the Captain America franchise, which is a shame since it literally means that Sam is still living in the shadow of his predecessor, both narratively and in the real world. But Sam has been Captain America for over 6 years now, so it's tiring to see that he hasn't been able to really stand on his own yet. Then, Sam has to fight the leader and deal with the ramifications of Thunderbolt Ross turning into the Red Hulk, which means that this movie essentially acts as a sequel to 2008's The Incredible Hulk for some reason. But that also happens to be one of the least memorable MCU films. Now, I do actually like how the movie tried to connect to some older storylines from the MCU, but these storylines just didn't come together to form one cohesive narrative. So while it was nice to see the leader, Thunderbolt Ross, and even Betty Ross again, it just didn't make sense as to why Sam Wilson would be the character who was interacting with all of them. The Hulk should be the character who is dealing with all of their shenanigans. And even if Marvel doesn't have the rights to make a full-length feature about the Hulk, that doesn't explain why he's just completely absent from the events that are taking place here. I mean, maybe he was involved with the story at one point, but this movie underwent so many reshoots that it's hard to tell what was even part of the original concept. Now, even with all of the substantial reshoots that this movie underwent, I have to admit that I wasn't expecting it to be great or anything. I would have been happy if the film was simply fun and entertaining, because that's all I really need out of a Marvel production. But while there are some fun and entertaining sequences featured throughout the film, I have to admit that most of it comes across as being a bit dull and boring. I mean, the best sequence in the entire film is definitely the fight scene between Sam and the Red Hulk, but that scene was plastered all over the film's marketing, despite the fact that the moment plays out as if it were meant to be a surprising twist in the narrative. So the audience is kept waiting for a scene that they already know is coming. And that does make everything leading up to the moment feel like a bit of a drag. Thankfully, Harrison Ford does give a really solid performance as President Ross / the Red Hulk. It's just a shame that his version of the character feels nothing like William Hurt's version of the character, despite the fact that they're supposed to be the same person. Now, Ford did an excellent job of taking over the role since Hurt's passing, but the character seems to have undergone a tremendous amount of growth off-screen that Ford might as well have been playing a completely different character. Still, Harrison Ford's performance is definitely a highlight of the film, but I think everyone else in the cast does really solid work as well. Anthony Mackie is great as Sam Wilson, Danny Ramirez is fun as the new iteration of the Falcon, Carl Lumbly is really solid as Isaiah Bradley, Tim Blake Nelson is good in his return as the leader, hell, even Giancarlo Esposito is good in his limited time as Sidewinder. It's just a shame that these talented actors aren't in a much better movie. And this is a film about how a corrupt politician with a shady past became the president of the United States. You would think that story would resonate with a lot of people right now, but the movie failed to be captivating in and of itself. Plus, even if the president turned into a rampaging rage monster, there's no way that the Secret Service or the military would shoot at him, let alone would he consider stepping down as the president. Out of all the crazy, unbelievable shit that happens in the MCU, that right there was probably the most unrealistic thing to happen so far. And while we're on the topic of things that are unbelievable, how the fuck does the existence of a god, one who was literally being birthed from the earth, not create an existential crisis throughout all of humanity? Like, people saw Tiamat rising out of the ground, and instead of freaking the fuck out and questioning how his presence affects all of human existence, they just decided to mine his corpse for resources? Sounds pretty strange, right? But while the post-Endgame Marvel films have spent a lot of time focusing on multiple variations of the afterlife, it never explored how the existence of these planes affected people's faith. Like, we don't know how the common man still holds religious beliefs after witnessing all of the faith-shattering things that happen in the MCU. I mean, if Thanos killing half of the universe had an understandably profound impact on humanity, then how does the existence of a Celestial not? How would people react if they found out that God didn't create the universe, Arishem did, and that Arishem specifically picked the Earth as a nest for another Celestial, regardless of how it affected the planet's population? How the fuck do people even know that Celestials are called Celestials? Who took the time to explain that? How did those conversations go? This movie isn't interested in answering any of those questions, so it glosses right over them in order to distract us with, introduce us to, adamantium for some reason. So, yeah. Despite the fact that I really wanted to enjoy it, I can't deny that Brave New World turned out to be an underwhelming feature. Regardless of if the movie was reshot to death, that doesn't change how the final product feels like an unstructured, unnecessary, incohesive, visually ugly, thematically empty, and altogether disappointingly forgettable mess of a movie. And that especially sucked given how the film is made up of interesting characters played by incredibly talented performers. So while I do think that the movie acts as a perfectly fine action film, I can't deny that I also think it's one of the worst MCU features to date. One that I can't see myself rewatching as much as I rewatch most of the other Marvel films. Which means that Captain America Brave New World would, unfortunately, not get a recommendation from me. But I appreciate anyone who took the time to hear my full thoughts on this movie, so as always, thanks for watching.